Thank you, Kate. Thank you for the welcome, and thanks to Nick for the technical assistance. I was saying this is the first time I've done one of these online talks, so if anything goes wrong, it's entirely my fault and not Nick or Kate's. Yeah, it'll be about 45 minutes from me with some slides. There's a video in the middle, which I very much hope will work for you all. If you have any trouble viewing it, then Kate's very kindly said she will share the link to our YouTube channel where you can catch up with that either whilst I'm talking or at another time. And I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have at the end. There's one or two names that I recognise today, so it's possible that you might see some photos of folk that you might recognise. But I will just start sharing my presentation with you now. Okay, well, fantastic. This is very strange because I can see my presentation, but I can't see any of you. So I'm sure Nick or Kate will give me a shout if there's any problems. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you this evening and hosting. And hello to you wherever you might be in the Lothians, or obviously as this is via Zoom and being recorded, hello wherever you might be in Scotland, the UK or the world. So I'm Kate, and I've worked for the Firth of Forth Futures Partnership since 2012, and our partnership's incredibly proud of what we have achieved collectively since 2012 around the Upper Firth of Forth. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you this evening. And as you might imagine, there's a huge amount more information on our website. So if something intrigues you, then I'd encourage you to head over there at another point and to have a little look at what else we've been up to. So this evening I'm going to cover a few things. I'm going to cover who, what and where. So who the partnership are and what's the landscape that we work in, where are we based. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of our previous work. So that's through the Inner Forth Landscape Initiative and through the Wanderings and Windings. And I'm also going to tell you a little bit about what we're up to at the moment and where we hope to go in the future. So that's through our work on the Inner Forth Habitat Network and some of our climate resilience work. But first of all, who are the Inner Forth Futures Partnership? Well, we're a group of 9 organisations working around the Upper Firth of Forth. We're led by the RSPB. So usually I'm in a lovely RSPB office called Skinflats. It's a very small reserve quite near to Grangemouth, but it has a lovely view over the river, up to the Ochils, and on a good day all the way down to the Forth Bridges. The partnership's also joined by Stirling, Clackmannanshire, Falkirk and Fife local authorities, by the Green Action Trust, by Historic Environment Scotland, by Nature Scot and by Sustrans. And together we make up the partnership. Now over the years we've worked with and through a good number of other groups and organisations, including voluntary groups and schools, and we want to continue working in this way. And we look for opportunities to collaborate with others to support and enable heritage activity on the ground and to engage people more widely with the fantastic wealth of natural and cultural and built heritage that the Inner Forth has to offer. But at the moment, our partnership's working to 4 aims. We want to try and raise awareness of the heritage in the area. We want to support communities to take on a greater role in management and promotion of that heritage. And we want to pilot partnership approaches to habitat networks and climate adaptation. We're also working to deliver the legacy of our previous work. But where are we doing all of this? Well, we're doing this in what we call the Upper Firth of Forth, and it's a little bit of a construct, to be honest. It's an area between Stirling and between the Forth Bridges. It's roughly covered by the area that's in blue on this slide. And if you can see, if you know the area at all, it covers bits of Stirling, bits of Clackmannanshire, bits of Falkirk, bits of Fife. It's a really diverse landscape. It's a really important place for wildlife. It's at the heart of central Scotland. We're incredibly close to the conurbations of Glasgow and Edinburgh and Dunfermline. In pre-COVID times, you could very easily come up for a day trip as well. So here for wildlife, we have international and national designations. We have special protection areas, we have a Ramsar site, and we have a triple SI. And these around the Forth area are particularly focused on overwintering wildfowl and waders. there's a fantastic wealth of birds. And especially at this time of year, these are some of the sights that you might see if you were lucky enough to be out there. So it's also a landscape where heritage and communities are under quite significant pressures. So we have issues perhaps related to sea level rise, to do with climate change. We have developmental pressures, economics, recreational use, and there's many communities that suffer inequalities and lack of access to services as well. It can be quite rural in some places. And these are some of the challenges that our work tries to address. But it's a landscape with a proud and diverse heritage that's centred on a strategic use of what the landscape and what the river has to offer. So we have things such as mining, trade and military history, Scottish governance. There's lots and lots of different stories to tell here, stretching all the way back to the Romans with the building of the Antonine Wall. And generally it's a very well connected landscape. We've got roads, rail links and a fantastic wealth of footpaths and cycle networks as well. So if you travelled around the landscape, then you'd see how dynamic the Forth is. You'd see the wanderings and windings and meanders as you're up near Stirling and as you pass down past Canvas Pools, Scottish Wildlife Trust Reserve, and as you passed a little bit further down past Alloa Inch. The top pictures here show some of that area. And then the Forth widens out as you pass through Falkirk and Fife. You'd see farmlands, wetlands, woodlands, many historic houses and structures and parks, lots of seawalls and bridges, and a number of those communication links that help people get around the landscape. However, lots of the communities that grew up around the river and in fact were there because of the river, no longer interact with it in the same way. As you might imagine, times have changed. We also have a very diverse mix of landscapes, and our partnership is particularly interested in wetlands, grasslands, intertidal habitats, and peatlands. But we're not just about the natural heritage. We're very, very interested in the built heritage and the cultural heritage as well. And in fact, it's that interlinking, that interaction between the two that we try and promote. We tend not to talk about one unless we're also talking about the other. And there's a wealth of history and built heritage that helps to tell the story of this landscape. Not all of it's visible, much of it's underneath the ground, some of it's not in the best condition. And as a partnership, we've tried to tell the story of how the landscape has changed from around 1750 onwards, and how these structures that you can see in the landscape help to explain the sort of landscape and communities and facilities that we have today. And in some places, we have huge numbers of visitors because of that historic heritage, and there's a fantastic story to tell there. And I'm sure many of you will have seen bits of the Inner Forth on film, and some parts of it perhaps on a sort of fiction, such as Outlander, and maybe other pieces on sort of archaeological programmes. And as I said, it's incredibly well connected, so it's really a place for people as well. We have a mixture of cities, towns and villages, lots of opportunities to get out on foot or on bike to explore that heritage. And we think that some of our works help to reveal that heritage as well, to shine a light on those hidden stories and supporting people to get out and engage with that heritage. And there's lots and lots of others doing similar supportive things in this area. So to tell you a little bit about some of the work we've done in the past, I'm moving on to talking a little bit about the Inner Forth Landscape Initiative. And perhaps some of you will have heard about this. And this was a 4-year programme of work that we delivered and designed. And when I started back in 2012, we were in receipt of a grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund to start developing this work. So I spent 1.5 years with someone else called Kate and my colleague Julie and the partnership working up what turned out to be 4 years of work. And then we were lucky enough to receive a delivery grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund to actually get on and see this work achieved in the landscape. And this programme of work was all about celebrating, protecting and improving the natural, cultural and built landscape of the Inner Forth. We had about 54 projects scattered around the area, as you can see on this map. We were looking at conserving and restoring features in the landscape that help to tell the story of the landscape. We were looking at recording and celebrating that heritage. We wanted to find ways to help people explore and learn about heritage in the area. And we also wanted to improve and develop skills and training opportunities. So those 54 projects ended up being worth about £4 million, and we were very grateful to receive about 1.9 million of that from the lottery. And this project wasn't just delivered through the 9 partners that I mentioned previously. This was down to many, many others who were involved and took a lead, including the Scottish Wildlife Trust and voluntary groups. And we really couldn't have achieved what we set out to without that input from many, many others, and that leadership from others as well, and that enthusiasm from people to come out and get involved. So I'm going to take you through a few of our projects, and then I'm going to show you a short film because there's some others who can far better and far more eloquently explain what the Inner Forth Landscape Initiative meant to them. But starting up at the top end of the Forth, RSPB Black Devon Wetlands, it's a place where my colleague Ali, who I would usually share an office with, spends a lot of her time. And this is a fantastic site because the investment through the lottery and through the partnership and through a fantastic set of volunteers as well, enabled the creation of a new nature reserve in Clackmannanshire. And Black Devon Wetlands, for those of you who may not have been or may not have heard of it, is right on the edge of Alloa. It's incredibly accessible. You can walk there in 10 minutes from the train station, and it's just behind some houses. And here we created a huge amount of new wetland. There was some existing wetland on the site as well, which had previously been award-winning, but had fallen into sort of site. And if you're heading there, if you happen to live in Alloa and you were heading there today, you would see pond dipping platforms, you'd see a fantastic viewing screen, and you'd see lots of local people enjoying it for exercise and recreation. And fingers crossed, when times change, Ali and her colleagues will be back to running events there as well. And moving around the Forth a little bit, we end up at Scottish Wildlife Trust's Cambus Pools Reserve in Clackmannanshire. And so this is just quite near to Cambus, next to the Diageo bonded warehouses. And it's a lovely site, freshwater pools right next to the salt water of the river. You can look one way and hear all the fantastic birds, look the other way and look all the way down the river. It's a lovely site. And here we were able to work with Rory and the volunteers to undertake some sort of innovative trial management. Here you can see there's something called a Truxer reed cutter. It's an interesting amphibious vehicle that means that you can get into really wet areas to cut reed bed. And the reed bed here had been choking the pools. And so what the operator was able to do in a very skilled way is to head into the pools, to cut the reeds and to clear them. And that means that the water opens up, improves the sort of oxygen quality in the water, and it means that you get a wider variety of bird species back in there as well. Now, this is an aquatic vehicle, but it can get stuck at times. And there are some very, very boggy bits of the site here. And I believe it did get stuck a few times. So volunteers here did a huge amount as well. They were able to work on some of the meadow that was at the side. They're able to brush cut certain areas and also hold a number of events. And I know they were out moth trapping a good amount during the sort of time this project happened. And actually here it wasn't simply about what we could achieve on the reserve, it was thinking about how you get to the reserve as well. And so the path that accesses the reserve was able to be upgraded. And what that means is it's slightly easier for people to get down to the reserve. And also it's slightly easier for those reserve vehicles to get down to the reserve. So it makes management that little bit easier, which of course is fantastic. So heading over to Stirling, we worked with Butterfly Conservation Scotland over at Wester Moss, which is a lovely triple SI designated for the large heath butterfly that you can see there. And Wester Moss is an interesting site because part of it is covered by Falin Bing. So Falin Bing, and Falin is an ex-coal mining community, And the bin, as you can imagine, is coal waste. It's that spoil that you get from these industrial landscapes. And due to the coal waste historically being put on the edge of the moss, and due to peat cutting in sections of the moss and drainage, what could be a fantastic sort of carbon sink is unfortunately leaching water. It's not as wet as it could be and as it should be and as it once was. So the work here through Butterfly Conservation, through volunteers and contractors, was really aimed at re-wetting the moss. And again, there were some quite interesting techniques that were tried. Some sort of traditional techniques that you may have seen or perhaps taken part in yourself. Some ditch blocking using plastic dams. And you can see in the middle there, David and colleagues struggling to put some of these incredibly long dams in. They're about two meters long, so you really have to push them in, interlink them, and then give them a good bang to get them the rest of the way in. And the reason you put these in is because some of the sort of holes through the peat that cause the water to escape can be quite deep down. We call them peat pipes, and they can be quite extensive. But it's fantastic when you put these dams in because you can instantly see the water backing up behind them, and so you get that instant satisfaction of seeing you've made a difference. But it really practically starts to re-wet the bog instantly. But they also use some large machinery, and as you can just see in the top right there, some rather large diggers came on site, and they were used to compact the peat to create bunds. And again, those bunded areas hold water far better. And as you can see from the bottom right, that work really started to sort of pay off within only a few weeks. A bit of rain, Scotch rain helps as well, but large parts of the moss have really improved their water holding since this has happened. And dragonflies have been seen ovipositing over the water in the reserve as well, which hadn't been seen for quite some time. So great news story there, but lots more work I'm sure will get done there in the future. And it wasn't just working through existing organisations and sorts of these, big organisations. We were able to work with and through voluntary groups as well. And a great example of this is over with West Fife Woodlands in Fife. And here we were able to work with the group to create an orchard on the site of the Valleyfield Estate's old kitchen garden. So in the top left there, that's what the site looked like in 2014. And the bottom right is how it looked in 2018. And it may look like a relatively small change, but a huge amount of work went in. The site had to be cleared, had to have fencing going in, drainage and pathworks. Trees were planted with schools. What looks like a deceptively sunny day in that top picture there was actually, I think it was February 2016, and it was bitterly cold. Those holes that the kids were planting trees in had unfortunately all got filled with water and iced over. So before the school groups could come and plant the trees, the group and myself and my colleagues ended up going out there, bailing out the water and having to smash some of the ice so that the trees could be planted. Very good fun. We were very thankful for the sun, but it does look like it should be a lot warmer than it was. And this is a lovely site because it's open to the community. It's in the middle of the Valleyfield Estate, which is incredibly well used by horse riders, by walkers, by cyclists. And it's in walking distance of a number of local schools that came and planted trees. So these kids that came out and took part in creating the site can hopefully come back and share it with their families and enjoy the fruit every year. And we were looking at planting in other places as well. And working with Bug Life, we created a number of pollinator-friendly habitats throughout Stirling and Falkirk. Some such as Grange Pans Meadows and Philin Bing are lovely sites where, due to the fairly thin soils, we're able to carry out some new planting and seeding. And other sites were a little bit different. So we were able to work with the new school that went in at Carron Grange in Grangemouth. It's an additional support needs secondary school. And we were able to work with them as they built their new school and create an accessible garden on the roof of, on the first floor level on what would have just been a completely empty flat roof. And this is a great asset. It means that pupils can go outside, they can enjoy that space. And when they're supported with their teachers, they can go out and do things like gardening and bug hunting in that space as well. So it's not just something to look at, it's a real asset for the school to use. And I said before, we're not just looking at the natural heritage, we're very much looking at the built heritage and how we can use it to tell the story of the landscape. And places like Clacks Tower help you to see how people have interacted with this place over time. So Clacks Tower in Clackmannanshire, in Clackmannan in fact, right at the top of King's Seat Hill. And this used to be the sort of head area of the county area, the sort of main town of Clackmannanshire. Fortunes fell and Alloa really grew up as the county town. And Clackmannan is a much smaller village today. But the work that Historic Environment Scotland undertook here at Clackmannan Tower can't really be seen from ground level. It's up there on the balustrades. It's to put in new safety features so that it's possible for you to, when the site's open, to go up and to walk around far more safely than you can before. These balustrades are actually doing an additional job. They go about 15 feet down into the stonework and they help to pin the stonework together as well. And we were also able to fund new lighting for the inside of the tower. And what that means is that if you are able to visit there today, you no longer have to go in with a hard hat and you're no longer going in walking around lit by a torch or by strings of lights. There's fantastic light that's been designed for the space that lights up those little nooks and crannies, those interesting pieces of architecture and heritage, and things that your guide can pinpoint and help to explain about the life this tower house has had. You get fantastic views from Clackmannan Tower, and it's somewhere I'd wholeheartedly recommend you going when it's possible for you to go there. But hopefully these pictures give you an idea of the landscape you can see from there otherwise. And another place that is one of my favourites, I have to admit, is the lime kilns down at Charlestown in Fife. And this is a little bit different for both us and Historic Environment Scotland. It's a site that's owned by the Broomhall Estate, quite a large landowner. And Historic Environment Scotland were able to work with the estate to look after, to sort of safeguard one of their structures. They're able to put in place some slightly new management. And what that meant is that this site, which has about 14 lime kilns of different ages down the front, it was able to be sort of cleared of some of the ivy and trees that had grown up. Some of the structure could be repaired so it's far safer, and that means that the Harris fencing that was in front of the site could be removed. And the kilns themselves, there's a process that's ongoing to put metalwork inside those kilns. So what it means is that you can get far closer to the piece of heritage. You can look in those kilns, you can try and imagine some of the heat that would have been coming off these structures and the way that people would have had to work. And there's some lovely new interpretation down there as well. And this is one of those sites that really helps to tell the industrial story of the landscape and give you an idea of just how busy this area would have been with trade coming in and out. And another site that starts to tell that story of how things have changed in the landscape and how what you see today is not what it perhaps would have always been like is over at Higgins Nuke in Falkirk. And here, actually, you can't see anything there at the moment. It's a large piece of salt marsh that's grown up, but it's where the Scape Trust and Stirling University carried out a couple of archaeological digs with a huge number of volunteers and a huge number of students from the University of Aberdeen. And they were looking for the site of James IV's document. Hi there. So I think someone might have their speaker other than me unmuted. So if you're able to mute, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. So this coastal archaeology was quite interesting because Richard there is carrying out some coring at an area that gets covered by high tide, so he had to time that quite carefully, as you can imagine. And this archaeology was really looking for that evidence of a dockyard. There's fantastic stonework that was found that shows that there was indeed something here before. There was an area of cobbling that went down into the Forth and some lovely walls. But was it James IV's dockyard where the Great Michael was built? That would have been the largest ship in the world in the first decade of the 16th century. But unfortunately, this was inconclusive. There's great evidence of there obviously being some kind of activity there, various activities over time, but unfortunately not able to say definitively at this moment that yes, that's the site. But as I think it always is with archaeology, you find out lots, but you create new questions that want to make you head out and find more out. And I mentioned that some of our work was through volunteers, and we were very keen on training and learning through the initiative as well. So we were looking for ways to increase biological recording and encouraging citizen science activity. So we had lots of skills and training workshops. And we were also finding ways to encourage people to get involved in historic research and recording. So this might have been through archaeological digs, through training sessions, or through supporting people to go out and research new histories of the landscape. And you can find far, far more about this on our website. And we were also able to work with and through a number of people that we supported Landscape Initiative finished back in 2018, and whilst you can see lots and lots of the benefits in the landscape and visit many of these places if you're lucky enough at the moment to be close by, we also wanted to encourage people to travel around the landscape. And so we have some interpretation in the landscape. We have an app that can be downloaded called Explore the Forth, and it will help to guide you around some of these places that I've talked about. Now, if you can't get out of wherever you are at the moment, that's okay. You can still download that app, and you can still find out some of the information. However, there's a little bit in there that wouldn't be accessible unless you were in a few locations, but I hope that wouldn't put you off. So I'm going to play a video now. Hopefully it will work, that tells you a little bit more about the initiative. And then I'll move on to telling you a little bit about what we've been up to slightly more recently.
Hi, good afternoon everybody. As you've already seen going under the bridges, and as we go up the river you'll see a lot of sort of industrial heritage. When people think of this area of the River Forth, they're thinking about a very human landscape. But at the same
Kate,
time,
we can hear the video, but we can't see it.
Yeah,
Do you mind starting it again? I just.
In a moment, we will get there. I think if I press, I think I must have pressed play too many times, which is never good. So I'm just going to come out of this and go back into it again. So just hold on one moment and I will come back to you. Thanks for letting me know that wasn't working, Nick. Right, okay, take two.
We're good.
Hi, good afternoon everybody. As we've already seen going under the bridges, and as we go up the river, you see a lot of sort of industrial heritage. When people think of this area of the Firth of Forth, they're thinking about a very human landscape, but at the same time there's also some really spectacular nature that you can find in this area.
It's a bit of a hidden and possibly a bit of a forgotten landscape. And I think as a result, it's been sort of left off the map a bit. So our aim is to put it back on the map.
There's a lovely mosaic of habitats throughout the inner Forth, one of which is Black Devon wetlands. Kind of wandering down a track thinking, this doesn't look very hopeful, past the pylons, there's an old tile factory. And then you just kind of follow the track down and suddenly it opens up. And you've got these open areas of grassland, and then come a little bit further across our boardwalk to the viewing screen. It's just how quickly the site has responded to the work that we've done, how quickly it's settled down, and it kind of all looks like it's just always been here now.
We've spent a few weeks coming down here and looking around the wetlands at different times, but what you guys haven't seen is the change that's taken place over the last year or so. We're just across the road from the Black Devon wetlands. They're sandwiched between the River Forth and us. That's yours, is it? Right, come on guys, let's go. We've run different activities down at the Black Devon wetlands. We've engaged with a bunch of different partner agencies like the RSPB. Do you guys know there was an aircraft factory just along there? Really? 100 years ago. It's about kind of embedding in the child's conscience the idea of that wetland as a resource for them and their families for the rest of their lives. We're getting support to deliver learning experiences that we can't deliver in school.
I've spoken to lots of people who just didn't realise that that old building covered in ivy and growth was that significant. But working with Historic Environment Scotland, we've been able to strip that back. People can now see it. People are asking, hold on a minute, what is this building? And when you start telling them that this was the first industrial distillery in Scotland, it gives a lot of significance to this place that local people just drove past every single day and just hadn't even questioned what was there. It's adding a piece of visual heritage to that landscape that previously wasn't there.
And there is no longer any reason for a new coal mine to be a blot on the landscape. The men are drawn from the surrounding villages, and the old...
We're high up because we're on top of a coal bin, which is the spoil from the old coal industry. There used to be mining pits here. Flin Bing today is a lovely green area with colourful wildflowers, fresh air, birdsong, and back in the coal mining days it would have been a big, black, bleak landscape, no wildlife around. For the Inner Forth, this is a very important site because we actually have an open, rich habitat here with flora-rich species grassland. And I would say that I do meet a lot of ex-coal miners who remember this place from when it was bleak and black, and they love this place now to come and walk and just chill out and enjoy the fresh air.
And now, here in Scotland, is the pithead of the New World, right in the heart of the countryside.
I think people have appreciated the opportunity to come and speak to experts and practice their skills out in the field, and also network with other people in the local area, which has been something that's really nice to see. I just feel extremely lucky to be part of such an amazing, diverse programme. I've actually learnt so much from the volunteers that we work with, and I'm continuing to learn all the time.
You see the landscape and whatever you're painting in a completely different way. The area is just full of potential. You just wonder where a morning's gone when you're sitting with a painting easel there. I started off with watercolours. Iffley was the one that sparked it, and this is the great thing about Iffley, that it gives you a feel, gives you the opportunity of of trying something out.
There's always wildlife close where you live, but sometimes you tend to ignore it. I remember taking a picture of a flock of lapwings with Grangemouth in the background, so the smoky chimneys and the birds come together in the landscape in a sort of way. It is unique.
It's the cement that holds communities together, is their heritage.
IFLE have given us the tools and given us the opportunity of learning. But I think it's really breathed new life and awakened the whole area and people's interest. Having that understanding, having that knowledge is hugely important, because that's the only way we're going to get a place like this protected.
And you've got so many people now interested not just in the natural history, but in the cultural history, the archaeology of the Inner Forth. They're excited about it, and yeah, hopefully that will continue after the project finishes.
Also, with the line code, leadership right into the
Well, I hope you enjoyed that snapshot from the Forth. I should say, if there was a little bit of stuttering there or jumping, apologies. I know playing these videos can be a bit tricky over Zoom sometimes. So we do have that available on our YouTube channel, along with other videos and films that we created through the Landscape Initiative. But I'm going to move on now to talking about something a little bit different, something that we started sort of after we finished the Landscape Initiative in 2018. And one of the things that many people said to us was, well, what's next? What are you doing sort of after IFLE? And the fact is that like many funded projects, you're funded to do a particular thing over a particular period of time, and you unfortunately can't continue forever. So we had 4 years of funding for the Inner Forth Landscape Initiative. And when we came to the end of that in 2018, as a partnership, we were very clear that we wanted to keep working together, which was fantastic. And at that point, Fife Council weren't a formal part of our partnership, but they came on board in late 2018. So we did end up with the 9 partners that we have today. And we wanted to find ways to build a legacy from that work through IFLE, to continue focusing on the built heritage and the natural heritage in the landscape, to find ways to support people to get out there and explore it, and also look after it in different ways, and sort of feel more confident and empowered and able to do that. So one of the first things we did was we actually went back to the lottery, another competitive funding bid that we were very pleased to receive. And this time it was for a much smaller project called Wanderings and Windings. And this was a project that lasted about a year. And it was designed to create 8 day-long routes around the Inner Forth. And this was all about finding ways to explore the area, and perhaps explore the area over slightly longer distances than we had done through the Landscape Initiative. And this was all about co-creation as well. We wanted to find ways to get people together, to get use local knowledge and that local interest to devise these routes. So we worked with Ian White Associates Landscape Architects, fantastic group of folk who were really on board with our idea. They were really keen to hear what people had to say, to learn about those local views, those local routes, those paths that are less trodden, that they felt, local people felt we should be including in these routes and bringing to local people. And when we started, we knew that we wanted to create 8 routes. We knew that we wanted them to be micro adventures. We knew that we wanted people to be able to walk or cycle or wheel, and we wanted people to be able to crisscross the inner Forth and explore hidden histories, hidden stories, as well as those sort of big wow factors of heritage and those sort of sights and sounds that you get around the area. And what we were able to do is go into community centres, seems crazy talking about it now, and get maps out, get pens out, post-it notes, and say to folk, where do you like to go for a walk? If you wanted to head out and clear your head, where would you go in the inner Forth? Or where do you take your kids? Or where do you go with your walking group? Or if you have people visiting, where would you go? What would you see? You know, which path is better, this one or this one? And from that, we had a huge amount of information. We had about 100 people took part in these sessions in the end. And through that, we were able to devise 8 routes. And the map at the bottom gives you an idea of where they go. And as if you know the area, the distance between, say, Stirling and South Queen's Ferry is quite a big distance. It could take you maybe 45 minutes to drive. It would probably take you a couple of days to walk, I'd say. But the idea with these routes is that they are adventures. You don't have to go out and do one in one go. You could break it up. You could do a little bit of it, and you can come back to it. And we thought that's the beauty of these. And when we launched them in late 2019, we launched them with a small festival of events. We guided people by foot or by cycle round them. And we also launched them on our website. And one thing that's really important to say that I forgot is that these routes are waymarked. They use existing walking and cycling paths. We didn't create any new paths. So if you go out on one of these wanderings or windings, you're on a footpath, you're on a quiet road, you might be on a sort of a route that's already there. It might be a little bit muddy at times. It's not perhaps paved all the way. It may not be accessible in all areas, and we haven't been able to mark all of those. But the idea is that it's meant to be a bit of an adventure. And there's plenty of other places where we hope you'll be able to find out additional information if there's a particular bit of the route that you would like to know more about. But these routes that we actually created 9 in total in the end. 8 loops and then 1 mega round the Forth route, which is designed to be a sort of reinvention of the popular Sustrans round the Forth route. Takes a slightly different route. It's a bit more off-road. Perhaps if you had a gravel bike, something like that, it would be a great exploration. And that's something like 100 miles long. And the shortest one, I think, is our Abbey to Sea route, which is maybe more sort of 15 miles. So they're still fairly lengthy, but as I said, you could head out and do part of one of these loops and head back to see another section of it another day. And if you head to our website, you're able to download each of these 9 routes. And they come with a bespoke route guide each. One side has a little OS map and the other side has some points of interest. So it would tell you about those heritage features that you head past on your way. It'll pinpoint some particular locations, and you follow these roundels that have been put out in the landscape, and you should find your way around. But when you're on the website, you can also download what's called a GPX track. And that's something that you can download to your phone, and you'd need an existing mapping app to open it in. So if you had something like Strava, perhaps you could navigate yourself around the route using that. And we obviously launched these back in 2019, and then last autumn we were able to run a walking challenge. We're walking and cycling challenge. We wanted to try and encourage people to use them a little bit more whilst it was still safe to get out around the area. And we had some lovely feedback from that. We had about 75 people involved in total in the end, who were delighted with getting out and exploring new places. So if you happen to be listening tonight from somewhere in the inner Forth, then I'd encourage you to have a look at one of these. And if one of these happens to be local to you, perhaps you can see where you can travel to from your home. Obviously not too far. Don't want to get anyone in trouble, but they're there. You can do some armchair walking and cycling as well. And I guess just as wanderings and windings were one way of us contributing to kind of the network of ways that people get around the landscape, the partnership's also been thinking about how things like species and travel around the landscape as well. And so another piece of work that we've done relatively recently is thinking about how the vision for Scotland's nature network can be realised here in the Inner Forth. And this piece of work was something that we did with a different group of people. So usually lots of our work is out there with communities, with volunteers, with schools. But this time we ended up speaking to what we call practitioners. So folk in local authorities, in conservation organisations, in some of those statutory agencies. And we were talking to them to pull together this idea for a habitat network for the Inner Forth. And this was supported through the EcoCo Life project, so a project that worked across central Scotland. You can find out a bit more about this on their website as well as ours if you're interested. And the principle behind this was going through a kind of three-step process to think about where the best places for people and wildlife, well, where are the best places to work for people and wildlife in the Inner Forth. And this is particularly thinking about if you wanted to do some land management, perhaps you had some funding from somewhere, you might want to do some habitat work, or perhaps you owned a site and you wanted to think about how you could manage that in a different way. So whilst we were looking at this at quite a large scale across the whole of the Inner Forth area, in fact we used a slightly bigger area than the whole of the Inner Forth, you could equally take the same principle and think about perhaps in your garden, a local park, a nature reserve, or a larger land holding. And the way that we did this is we used a three-pronged approach. So we thought about the existing habitat networks that were in the Inner Forth. So we thought about the wetlands and rivers, the intertidal habitat, the woodlands, the grasslands and open mosaic habitat, and the peatland and heathland that were already there, that were already mapped. So we're talking about things like triple SIs, looking at habitat mapping that local authorities and people like Nature Scott already have. We're looking at sort of, local nature conservation sites, those sort of designated pieces of land. We also thought about ecosystem services. So after mapping those habitats, we looked at where in the landscape was particularly important for a subset of ecosystem services. And we picked ones that we felt were important to the area and important to these habitats. So if you did this process in another area, you'd probably pick different ones. We thought about flood risk, we thought about air quality, and we thought about the index of multiple deprivation. And we thought about land capability for agriculture as well, because agriculture and soil use is quite important in the Inner Forth area. And then the third piece of work we did, sort of layered on top of those mapping exercises, was a bit of blue sky thinking to think about opportunity areas. So where could we deliver the network? Where might there be real opportunities, perhaps because land's in certain ownership, or where would be a fantastic place to do a piece of work? But we also thought practically about some of those barriers to realisation. Again, whether that's practical, perhaps whether it's policy, perhaps it's funding, it's resource. And what we ended up with after a huge amount of being in a room with other people, drawing on maps and discussions and going backwards and forwards and GIS work, was a series of maps for the Inner Forth area at a pretty broad brush scale, it would be fair to say. And this is the east one. There's a western map as well. And the eagle-eyed of you out there will spot that this is covering quite a big area of Fife. And the mapping I showed you before, the Inner Forth area sort of didn't quite go that far east. So this is what I mean by us working over a slightly larger area for this piece of work. And so what we're able to present through this mapping and this approach is a locally mapped vision for a local scale nature network. And we also documented the process we went through, created a practitioner guide so that others could follow the same process. And this is something that the EcoCo project were keen to produce so that they could look at other opportunities to deliver this type of work. And we also created a call to action. So alongside this mapping, we picked out a number of opportunities that we felt would be fantastic to deliver. We looked at, in a little bit more detail about what it might be required to deliver those. And you might think, okay, well, you've got some lovely maps there, Kate, and you've obviously had some really good conversations in the room. Well, what next? What do you do with this? How could you possibly turn it into reality? Well, it'd be fair to say that this is really the start of the process. This is a piece of work that we hope will inform some of the future work that we're doing as a partnership. We hope it's something that local authorities who are part of the process might be able to use some of their, inform some of their planning. It's certainly something that the Green Action Trust has value. But it's also really, really important to say that we did not engage with every landowner, with every stakeholder throughout this area. It's a really broad brush map. Just because a location is coloured in a certain colour on the map, it does not mean that we're going to come in and deliver some action. It's a location that through the process we went through, we felt there was an opportunity for something there. If you go out and ground truth it, if you walk on the ground, it may not be possible. So it's meant to be one piece of the toolkit for those who are out there looking for opportunities or perhaps managing land. And one of the things we were able to do with that mapping was find locations where we were looking to carry out wetland enhancement. And I'm really pleased to say that over the last year, we've had work at 5 sites funded through Nature Scott's Biodiversity Challenge Fund. And this is a great piece of funding that's there to deliver change on the ground for habitats. And we worked with Scottish Wildlife Trust at Carron Dams, with Stirling Council up at Kildene Wetlands, with Falkirk Council at Bothkenna Pools, with RSPB at Black Devon Wetlands, and with Fife Council at Bluther Wetlands. And the funding that we've had through Nature Scott, about £100,000 in total, will get this trucks a reed cutter out again, I'm pleased to say, at Bothkenna to do some more reed cutting. We'll get some big diggers out again at Bothkenna to create new ponds, and do very similar work up at the Bluther Wetlands that you can see in the top right hand corner there. Some great work there as well. And we're partway through that, so I don't have any after photos, I'm afraid. These are very much sort of before and during and in progress. But there is work furiously going on in the ground over the next few weeks to try and get this finished before the end of the financial year. But hopefully I'll be able to show you some after pictures at some point. Which kind of takes me on to the sort of final piece of the puzzle, thinking about where next. So the work that I've described so far is landscape scale. It's working through partnerships. It's working to benefit built and natural and cultural heritage, to involve communities, to empower people, to encourage people to explore the landscape. And we were looking as a partnership as well at where we felt there were some gaps and some opportunities. And we started talking about climate resilience in the Inner Forth. Perhaps no surprise, you know, the river is such a central force there. There's so many communities around that face challenges. And when we started to think about this last year, we were also in the middle of COVID, it would be fair to say. So we'd started thinking about this idea of a Climate Ready Forth project back at the end of 2019, and approached a funder at that point. And we unfortunately got asked to go away and keep thinking about our ideas, keep developing them. And so we were able to do that over the last year. A little bit slower than we might have planned last February, but we did carry out some engagement with communities via Zoom nonetheless. So our idea for Climate Ready Forth is thinking about how we can contribute to a green recovery, how we can support communities and heritage to become more resilient, and how we can encourage sustainable and sort of interlinked actions as well. And we're really thinking about how we can adapt to climate change, how we can perhaps take mitigation actions as well. And we hope this will be a piece of work that we will be working on for the next few years. It's something we are in our initial development phase at the moment, We're looking for some funding at the moment to take us into a funded development phase, because there's some pieces of work that we might need some contractors to help us with that it's just not possible for us to fund within our and deliver within our existing team. And then we will want to go into that sort of delivery phase where we can take some action. And the idea through this project as well is that we want to try and pilot some new approaches. We might not get everything right. We want to try some new things here in the Inner Forth. And we want to shout about them as well, and to show other people that there's a new way possible of sort of thinking about these things. So one of the first things we did was go out, Chloe, our community engagement officer, went out and spoke to about 15 different people from different community organisations around the Forth, and asked them some questions about their thoughts around the area, their feelings in relation to climate change, their concerns, and their sort of visions for the future in their community. And we got a fantastically wide-ranging response, as you might imagine. And doing this, I think it was last September. Again, the idea of sort of COVID, of opportunities, of being able to get outside and access nature or heritage or take exercise was all really, really important. And what we've done is we've taken those responses, and we've taken the responses we had from talking to a wide range of other organisations and groups in the area, and we've formed them into 3 broad areas that we will focus on for our development. And it's fair to say, again, this is right at the start. So one area of this project we think will be around supporting and empowering communities to adapt to change, looking at ways to secure positive outcomes for health and well-being, for economy and environment. So what does that mean? Well, things like finding ways to encourage people to take part in decisions about heritage in their place. So maybe a bit more of that drawing on maps type of thing. Looking for opportunities to upskill people in ways that will benefit their future. And also looking for opportunities for people to get out and about, probably school children as well. Really want this to be participatory. We want people who would take part in these activities to co-design them as well. Not just all about other people coming in and saying this is what should happen here. It's about people looking at their place and identifying their priorities for where they live. And the second area is around demonstrating innovative approaches to managing heritage assets so that we address the need for climate change adaptation and mitigation. So again, we're talking about built and natural heritage here. We know there's lots of diverse climate change impacts and issues, and we will want to pick and choose where we work for most impact. And we also want, through this, maybe to find opportunities to use heritage in different ways. Could we be thinking about planting orchards in old heritage sites, using gardens for different uses? Who knows? Have to wait and see. And the third area is around supporting economic resilience through new and sustainable and interconnected uses of heritage assets. And I think I've explained a little bit about that already. There's a fantastic wealth of heritage in the Inner Forth. There's lots of opportunities to get out and about, but actually perhaps there are new opportunities that we can encourage tourists or local visitors to explore some of those lesser known heritage features. Are there opportunities to encourage investment or donations, or perhaps in pieces of heritage when you visit, so that that investment, those donations, can be reinvested to make that site a little bit more sustainable than it was? Can we run events to get people out to certain places to look at these locations in new ways? Well, there's a lot of opportunity out there, and this is one of the things that we're really excited about, is seeing just where we can go with this over the next few years. So as we look into the future, don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately. We don't know what the future will bring, but we think there's lots of opportunity. We're really encouraged by the work that we've done in the past and the enthusiasm that we've found in the landscape to continue working in this pan-landscape across boundaries way, forging new partnerships, working with new communities in new ways. And we're really looking forward to delving in and seeing what we can find. So perhaps I can come back and tell you a little bit more about that in the future. fingers crossed. But in the meantime, I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have, and I'd certainly encourage you to head out to our website to have a little look for a bit more information. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much, Kate. That was absolutely fascinating. What an amazing journey through that variety of landscape. I really enjoyed hearing about all the sort of habitat creation that you're doing for all the different species and the habitat networks, and also about the built environment as well. And definitely echo what's been coming up in the chat as well, of lots of people saying how inspiring the talk was, and what incredible achievements you've been making with your partnership working there as well, and yeah, interest in the app as well. I've definitely added a lot of new places onto my list for when I can when we can travel again. Plus, I've also added a desire to have a go on an amphibious reed bed cutter at some point in my life. It looks amazing. So thank you again, Kate. That's absolutely brilliant. I only noticed one question coming up actually, which was, let me just scroll back to that. That was Sandy was asking about whether the area has suffered at all given the restrictions that have been in place, or whether it's flourished.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Sandy. That's an interesting question. So I live right at the sort of northwest tip of the Inner Forth area. I'm based up in Stirling, so I've been really limited, as I'm sure everyone has, in where they've been able to get to. And I've been working from home, so I am this evening. And so I guess my feelings are from those folk that I've been speaking to who have been out and about, so people who look after the reserves, or perhaps sort of volunteer and been able to get out at some of those different sites and structures. And I think what's been really, really clear is that getting out and about and having that access to green space, high quality green space, has been incredibly important. And I know that that is not unique to the Inner Forth area. And what we do have in the Inner Forth are some fantastic sort of green spaces that have lovely, heritage stories. So you might have places like the Kinneal Estate, where actually there's great woodland to walk around, lovely parkland. And there's great structures there that sort of tell the story as well. Or you might head down to the sort of Bowness foreshore area, lots of mining heritage there, but great views across the Forth, plenty of space to get out and walk. So I certainly know that green space has been really, really well used. I'm sure there's been some antisocial behaviour issues in some locations, but there always are. Unfortunately. And I think what it's really meant is that I guess some of the challenges have been around doing some of the work. So I guess when you're thinking about, has the area suffered, perhaps there's some work that people had planned to deliver that just had to be stopped, put on the back burner, or done in a different way. I certainly know that some of my colleagues who work with volunteers have been able to have their volunteers out an awful lot less. I know that will have been the case with the Wildlife Trust as well, I'm sure. So I think some of those things are just, you can't escape from those at the moment. It's just not possible. But I think those opportunities for people to get out and about close to home have been really important. So actually that fantastic path network, the cycle networks that I've been telling you about, I think people are sort of flourished by exploring those new locations.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Yes, it certainly is a challenging time at the moment, isn't it? We've got one more question come up. I'm just going to, we've had a lot of people saying how much they've enjoyed the talk, so I'm just going to put a link in that Nick, thank you, shared with me for where you can find the talks, all of the Scottish Wildlife Trust talks. So I've just popped that in chat so that people can see that. So we had a question from Sarah. Do you think community ownership of land would be an important route for some areas?
Interesting question, Sarah, thank you. I'm not sure. It's not something we've spoken about a huge amount within our partnership, but it's something that I think I think does have opportunities in lots of different places, and I'm in absolutely no doubt there would be somewhere in the Inner Forth that would be appropriate for that, and that there may well be a community out there who are interested in that. Obviously, it comes with its own challenges, not least funding, maybe to purchase somewhere like that, needing to think about how it's managed, how you want to use it, why you're doing that, how you set that up. I think that community ownership of land would be really interesting and quite exciting. It would be a real opportunity to have a sort of community level sort of delivery happening in a certain location. It would be a very good opportunity, I think, for the development of maybe a local place plan around how a particular community could manage and look after a particular site. But it would be fair to say I can't think of any off the top of my head. I know there's lots of locations where community groups are incredibly involved, but whether that formal ownership is something that they would want to take on, they may have management agreements with landowners, whether they'd want to sort of step up and step forward in that way, I'm not too sure. But certainly that could be something that comes out of the work that we do in the future.
Lovely, thank you very much. Well, as I can't see any more questions in the chat there, so I guess I will. Oh, hang on, we have one more. At the beginning of the talk, you suggested that the Inner Forth was a somewhat artificial area. Are there plans for spreading to the whole of the Forth area?
Oh, how long is a piece of string? So the area that we, the sort of lozenge that we worked in through the landscape initiative was set through a sort of landscape study that we carried out, looking at the different types of sort of land use in the area. And at that time, it was also set by the funding that we were targeting. We had funding through the Heritage Lottery Fund's Landscape Partnership Scheme funding, and they advised that you didn't work over more than about 200 kilometres squared. So we snuck in with 202 kilometres squared. And a huge amount of that, as you can imagine, is the river itself. And as you probably spotted, we didn't actually work on the river itself in any locations. We did create a new managed realignment site at RSPB Skin Flats that I didn't happen to talk about this evening. But we've expanded a little bit, and that has been around thinking about where does it make sense to draw the line, if it makes sense. So it can be very confusing when you're trying to describe exactly where it goes. But we definitely want to work in an area that is still linked to the Forth, both strategically and sort of historically and from a land use perspective. Once you get a little bit too far away or beyond a certain distance in any direction, then actually those communities and that sort of physical landscape and the history starts to become less related to the Forth and the impact that the Forth has had on that area, and perhaps more related to something else. So I don't see that our area would expand too much. I certainly don't think that we would be expanding hugely, perhaps beyond the bridges. I mean, you get into slightly different local authority areas there, and different sort of different challenges in the landscape. And we also know that if you sort of head east as well, I know there's work that the Wildlife Trust are doing in Edinburgh through the Living Landscapes programme, and certainly you don't want to start replicating excellent work that's already happening elsewhere.
Great, thank you. I'm conscious you've had a long day, Kate, so we've had one more question come in. Would you?
Yeah, happy to answer another one. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So last one then. So have you been able to engage with the new owners of the former power station and what they can bring to your projects, and perhaps involve the use of the railway along the Forth?
Okay, thanks, Norman. Big question there. So we have 5 council as part of our partnership. And I think if we were going to engage with sort of big players in the landscape like that, we'd be really keen to do it through some of our existing partners. So we know there is sort of various planning groups that look at how the Longannet sites and the Valleyfield Ash Lagoon sites are being used, and sort of what's happening. I know for some aspects of those, that sort of wider industrial site, there's management plans being drawn up. And I think it would be fair to say at the moment, the stage in that process that is all at is perhaps a little bit early for us as a project to get involved. We know that when we start looking for funding, perhaps from places like the lottery or elsewhere, it's going to be time bound. We'd need to deliver certain things within a certain amount of time. And it could be that it doesn't quite tally with what some of these other large projects are looking to do. But certainly the Longannet Power Station, it's a huge feature in the landscape, was a huge employer. It's going to be a site where a huge amount of economic activity will hopefully happen, and lots of potential for change there to benefit communities around the Forth and potentially natural heritage as well. So I think never say never, but right at this moment in time, we're not engaging there. No.
Great. Lovely. Thank you ever so much, Kate. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us this evening. As I say, it's been fascinating and inspiring talk, and we really wish you well with the future of it, and we'll be looking forward to following on your website and things like that to see your sort of future developments. So,
thank you very much, Kate, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thanks everyone for coming. It's been lovely to see you all, and yeah, lots of applause going on. We look forward to hopefully seeing some of you at our future talks as well. Thanks everyone. I'm enjoying seeing all your reactions and responses here. So keep warm and stay well, and hopefully see you all again soon. Thanks everyone. Good night.